Hello and welcome back to CamBro Conversations. Today's conversation, we are talking all things food, fitness, meal prep, and much, much more. To do so, I'm joined by Jonny Becker. Jonny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Excited to have you. And I want to know, how did you go from Hollister to being the coach's chef?
Late nights and tears. Effectively, long story short, it was a few times that when I first started out on this journey, I was thinking about, as I'm sure many people do, about money, right? You're like, right, well, if I do this, this, and this, I can make this, this, and this, and I can pack in the normal 9 to 5 job and be free. And then I kind of started out on the journey, a bit of Instagram posting, trying to get my name out there. And it was on my breaks at Hollister. I was working at Westfield in London. I would go out, buy my ingredients for the weekly cook-off. Sometimes I'd finish at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and I'd be then going back to my flat, cooking until 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking, well, if I don't get this, this, and this done, I'm not going to be able to make the deliveries tomorrow. And there were a couple of moments where I was on my haunches, like, I can't do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. And it got to a point where I wasn't having any days off. So I made that decision I'm either going to never have a day off for the rest of my life, and this is going to be my life, or I've got to pick one. And I picked the meal prep business at that point in time. Yeah.
And the meal prep business was supplying to gyms or users direct? How was it all structured?
So users directly, I guess, general population, fitness goers, business owners, athletes, Olympians, like loads of people, some gyms. But yeah, it just grew and kept growing, which is really nice. And until COVID hit.
And it forced a lot of us to pivot, didn't it? And it forced you to pivot into this role now as the coach's chef. And what does that involve?
Effectively, so I'm now delivering all the things that I was doing in my meal prep business. So the meal creations, everything I was trying to do with that business. And at one point in time, my mission statement was, I want to be the best meal prep company in the UK, and not just provide the food that people can eat, but also the other bits that go with it. Calories, performance, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we'll get to in a moment. And I'm now going into coaches groups, like I say, to teach this. So leveling up their clients, getting better results. Ultimately, then the coach may or may not earn more money because the client is staying. And it's just it's a level up of the service, effectively, like a permanent or resident in-house chef to coaches communities that clients can ask away.
It's a huge value add to a service where nutrition forms such a big part of a coach's program. Of course, we've got the training, but the nutrition side of things is where a lot of people tend to struggle. Interestingly enough, in the total side note, we'll put a pin in it. I think a lot of people who just say, oh, I just struggle with food, actually their training tends to be quite rubbish as well. But food is such a huge part when it comes to energy balance, which of course we know is really the dictator of what we're going to look like and what the scale is going to do and what our check-in photos are going to do. But when you add an element of support to the nutrition side, I think you do stand out a lot more, because I've seen so many different meal plans, and I've never really done coaching, but just based on the Instagram page, people will send me, do you think this is right what my coach has sent me? And I hate when that happens, because it undermines that coach. But it's like, you should have an open enough dialogue to say that to your coach. But equally, the standard of the meal plan or the nutrition plan or the meal options that you see sent around the internet or you see on screenshots on forums, it's almost always terrible. So to upgrade that, to bring a better level of taste, variety, even just a better like range of foods, is a bit of a game changer, Jonny. And I guess that's one of the areas that you step into.
100%. Yeah. I mean, funnily enough, last night I was having a conversation with my in-laws, and there are different types of people, right? So they don't eat vegetables because they don't know how to cook it. So there are a certain batch of people who genuinely would do well under a meal plan because they know this is what you're eating at this time, blah, blah, blah. Now, the fitness space with online coaching, I believe, has gone into a different tact. It's all a little bit more organic rather than the old school bro way of cooking. And actually, some of the coaches, they just do their own thing, right? So, and even somebody to say to you, right, Colin, right, what do you do on a daily basis? How can I get your physique? What do you eat? Well, whatever I do in my job and my life is completely separate to what you may or may not want to do and what you want to achieve. And I can tell you what I'm going to do, but ultimately it needs to fit in and around yours, which is why you then have all this keto diet, fasting. There's just, I mean, an eclectic selection of diet. You name one and it's probably it, right? And so you have this like a bit more of an organic approach. So people may need a bit more direction. Others just want an idea about something and then they can implement it themselves effectively.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of like flexible dieting within a structure, and I'm sure we'll get onto that as that comes. But coaches outsourcing a little bit of their nutrition stuff to you to try and bring that to the game. What do you see as food's most important role in this setup?
Well, I guess the tip of the iceberg is to get a result, right? And leading you into that, I think there's a lot of steps along the way. Performance, recovery, sleep, energy, mental bandwidth. There's a lot of the times when even myself, completely guilty, hands up, not very podcast friendly with the hands up, or with inverted commas. But you know, I'm sure you've been there, and at the time of this recording, we're going into this Christmas festive period, the gooch of the year. I'm sure you've heard that terminology before. Not people don't really know what to do with it. Everyone's eating food because they don't want to throw it away, and you find yourself after a day or two, or even half a day, I've eaten like shit today, and I feel a certain way because of it. And actually, if we can turn that around and get a color palette, and that's why I know we're going to mention that at some point, I'm sure, sort of a color palette on your plate, and making it less the same beige food that is about in our day-to-day lives at the moment. I think it can really improve your mood and performance through the day, and just make you feel better. And therefore the gym then isn't a problem because you're kind of fueling yourself in the right way.
Yeah, the term fuel is one that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up, Jonny, because I think it does fuel so many different areas and aspects. And we've just said the gym performance there. You've mentioned brain power and bandwidth earlier as well. There's a lot when I think of myself as somebody that wants to perform both physically in the gym, but also in my career. And then alongside that, in my content creation, these kind of three plates that I try and spin, I need to be eating correctly, not just in terms of the numbers, in terms of, oh, I need to eat 180 grams of protein and 3,000 calories. That's fantastic. But a lot of what makes up that food as well is very important. And I think you were talking there about where coaches have gone in recent years away from the kind of bro meal plan, which is actually a good move, of course. But we'd sometimes go towards like, oh, just fitting as much shit in your diet as possible, or just purely hitting the numbers and not worrying about the kind of nutrient density beyond that. And I guess the color palette hints towards that as well. And I know, for example, yesterday I had a manic day up and down to Liverpool, so 3 hours each way in the train, couple of meetings. I had a donut at my meeting. That's fantastic, but it's 400 calories I know at my intake. And I had a lot less high quality nutrient dense food because I was on the go. I was having a protein bar, I was having a protein shake. I wasn't having like vegetables with my with my kind of protein sources, which I normally would. And I definitely felt a little bit more dull. And the crash after like a donut in the middle of the day, I always find is an interesting one. And replace donut with any other sweet treat that we all get offered at Christmas time. It's very interesting how what we put in our body is reflected in how we behave throughout the rest of the day.
100%. And this, I guess, to note to anybody listening is that there's no. I'm not ever trying to say never. Well, I'm sure you're not either. Never not. I don't know. I've lost my words, but we're not saying to not ever eat a donut. I mean, when I was at Hollister, to go back and be congruent, I was eating like 2 or 3 or 4 M&S cookies on my break, right? Yes, I wasn't gaining weight because I was doing 20,000 steps a day. I was going to the gym for 2 hours, all this other stuff. but you're quite right. It's very easy to overeat. It's very easy to go down that route. And I really believe that people are, unless you've done it for a long period of time, you do not know the difference between tiredness and hunger. So like that crash after the donut, you're like, wow, I feel awful. I'm dull. I need a pick me up. And what's the thing when you're traveling? Well, it's a protein shake, a protein bar, sweets, whatever it might be, because your brain's like, or white monster, which then makes the whole thing worse, right? That's like running along with your hands over your eyes. What did somebody say to me once? This is going back to PE, A-level PE. It's like flicking the rearview mirror when your car's got smoke coming out the exhaust. Well, if I block the rearview mirrors, I can't see it. And therefore, sort of blissfully unaware, I guess is the word. But if we're talking about just hitting the numbers, you could eat a chicken breast and Haribo, right? So just hit carbs and protein, and it's not necessarily going to get you to where you need to be. I guess there's a slippery slope. We could open a can of worms with the slippery slope of bad choices, and it's easy to do, right? Yeah. We're under no illusion.
Were you in the fitness space when flex bowls were a massive thing? Do you remember them on Instagram? So they would be like, it'd either be like Greek yogurt or it would be oats, and people would just cover it in different toppings. And it was a really helpful move away from, oh, you can't eat like biscuits or cakes, or you can't have like sugary fruits and things like that, because people were covering the oat bowls and that. But it was getting to a stage where like your 50-gram bowl of oats was becoming like a 30 or 20-gram bowl of oats, so that you could fit in the junk on top of it. Whereas we both know that oats would be like a great carb source pre-workout and it would fuel you, but you were replacing it with like M&Ms and Skittles and Haribo and drizzling it in like loads of honey. And you're thinking your body might respond a lot better if you were using more nutrient dense. And flex bowls were massive on Instagram, and they were literally that. They were a flex. How much rubbish can I put on top of these oats in order to look cool on the gram? I eat this and I'm still ripped.
100%. And I think to not open a whole heap of conversation up in and around some of the people that may own those accounts, various substances that they may or may not be taking that normal people don't. I guess it's a blissfully unaware that they're doing that, right? So you're like, oh, they can't possibly be doing that. They've got my best interests at heart. They're eating these flex bowls and all this shit, sponsored by Malteser bars and all this other rubbish. And like you say, they've got the most defined abs that you can possibly imagine, that you and I probably don't even have, training our asses off 5-6 days a week. And I think you just get this extreme scenario that people end up trying to chase like a deer in headlights almost. I'll go that way. No, I'll go that way. Yeah. I think we just need that little balance, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. And I try and be as clear as possible with the listeners, but also the audience on Instagram, that I respond very well to being a creature of habit and structure. And although I've spoken there about my journey to Liverpool up and down, a lot of the foods that I had with me are pretty much foods that I go to all the time. So although I wasn't eating quite as well as normal, I was still having like a greens powder in my shake. I had a kiwi, I had an apple, I had some dark chocolate as a healthy fat, a kind of good fat. And I felt reasonable, but of course I got a bit of the donut crash. But more often than not, I respond extremely well to structure and routine. But I know that you're a man that believes in variety as well. What role can variety play in my food choice, and how can I benefit from it?
The main one is gut health, ultimately. And just all-round health from that respect. Everyone says that, well, not everybody, some experts out there say that sort of your gut is your second brain, all that kind of stuff. So even it's something as simple as taking chicken. So if you eat chicken this week, let's change it to turkey because it's coming up, right?
Feeling festive.
So we eat turkey this week, white meat. Next week, let's eat chicken. And then the week after that, let's pick a different protein source. So if you're eating fish one week, let's change the fish up the week after. And actually, fish is quite a good one, to be fair, because you can get through quite a few fish without coming back to the same one again. And then you've got that variety and your gut can do different things with it. I'm much like yourself, to be fair. I am just a creature of habit. Like if the routine wanders, I feel a bit uneasy. I almost need to go lie down in bed and sort of figure out what to do with myself. But yeah, ultimately gut health is the main one, the variety.
I'm glad you've spoken to that, because I wasn't aware of this until a couple of years ago, that basically you can build up an intolerance to food by over consuming it. And I am such a creature of habit that I genuinely had like a go-to lunch for about 6 years. It was 4 turkey sausages and like broccoli or carrots. And turkey sausages, like, you don't really need too much condiment if you don't want to, because they're really tasty and there's a bit of fat, a bit of carbs in them. And genuinely, sometimes after lunch, my stomach would be so bloated and distended. And anyone that follows me know that I'm pretty lean. I stay in shape all the time. And I was walking around just like unwell and I didn't realize until further down the line that I was causing myself a bit of damage by just constantly eating this one food for like 6 years. But I knew it was good macros. It tasted good. I could have it hot or cold if I was at the office or if I was on the way to meetings. It was okay to have it in terms of it was palatable. But I was doing myself a disservice in terms of the ability for my gut health to adapt to other foods. And if, for example, I did have something radically different one day at lunch, I would also respond badly to that as well, because my gut microbiome didn't recognize these other foods. I was so shut off to the rest of the food palette, Jonny.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've done a tiny bit of research on it, or just investigation almost, but I think you can get that with an opposite. So you can get intolerances through overeating, and like you just said, you can get intolerances by removing stuff. I guess when you and I were in school, there weren't as many allergies as there are now. It's like they've come out the woodwork. Yes, they might be more identifiable now, but also it could be the fact that there's lots of stuff being removed from things and the diet isn't varied enough. So that it could be that level as well. I mean, I'm similar to you with, there's certain protein powders and protein bars that affect me so badly that my stomach just bloats and it's like hard. It's ridiculous. I can appreciate how women feel at some point in time. I have a choice to avoid it, but sometimes, like you say, you're caught short and you just can't. And then that then affects the other choices. And I think sometimes people just aren't aware of that one decision can then affect a whole heap of others.
Yeah, protein bars is a great point. A lot of the time we reach for them where we've got a level of stress in our body already because we're in a rush, or we know we're running behind on our intake, or we're really hungry. And the kind of polyphenols and fake sugars that are within them as well, our body's not really evolutionary designed to deal with them. And don't get me wrong, I work with My Protein. They're one of my endorsement deals. I like their protein bars. But I also know that when I am under stress in my life and I pile on top of that gut distress and challenges with breaking down that food, it's normally a recipe for disaster for me or my toilet bowl. So it's not really very healthy, is it? So it's a good one for you to bring up, Jonny. And I guess one of the ways that we can maybe avoid too much of a reliance on the go stuff like that or rushing is meal prep. And that was one of the topics I was most keen to talk to you about. So most of the people that listen to this podcast consider themselves people that are pushing for high achievement, which of course comes with it a lot of busyness and stretching themselves. What advice would you initially give to them around meal prep?
My number one absolute golden rule is always cook more. Always cook more. Might be a clip for Instagram, that one. But seriously, like if we're in the kitchen cooking, just cook 2 or 3, 4 more portions of it. I understand people's living conditions. It can affect certain things because the space in the fridge and if people are house sharing and all that kind of stuff. But you can at least get 2 or 3 days ahead, right? Yes, you have to do it within your means. I'm not suggesting that everybody preps for the next month and freezes all the food. That's got a different conversation to it altogether. But yeah, cook more. So if we were to take an example of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we're cooking dinner those 3 days, you've then all of a sudden with 4 portions got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, plus lunches and dinners, right? And then you've only got to try and create yourself a couple of meals. That would be my golden rule.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And one of the key things you mentioned is around freezing. We'll put a slight pin in that and we'll come back to it in a wee second. But the fact that when you are in the kitchen, it doesn't take exponentially more time for you to prep one more portion, because it's roughly the same amount of time to cook 600 grams of chicken as it is to cook 200 grams. It's roughly the same amount of time to cook, I don't know, 400 grams of rice versus 150 grams of rice, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever numbers you're working with. So I find that very helpful, that if on a Monday night I'm in the kitchen after a busy day at work, I might as well prep and package up another couple of meals that will serve me later on. So huge fan of that, Jonny. What about like mass bulk preparation? So I know on a Sunday morning, that tends to be my time where I cook a lot of my lunches for the week. What kind of approaches can I employ to make that a bit more efficient as well?
I wish I could wave a magic knife. We're not going to use a wand because I'm a chef, so we'll wave a magic knife and make everybody amazing ninjas in the kitchen. But that's one thing. That the better your knife skills, the better your food prep's going to be, because it's going to be quicker. The big one I see with this is the cooling down time. And so if you do have any like gut issues, or you may not feel a bit uneasy about preparing things for 5 days time. When I had the meal prep business, we used to send food off to get tested, and it was 3 to 5 days life. That's what you could do. But the key here is making sure that you cool it down from its 75-degree cooked temperature of lean proteins as quickly as humanly possible. So leaving a chicken breast whole is not as good as shredding it down and leaving it by the windowsill, for example. We don't live in a day and age where yes, you need to cover it per se, but it's not going to be swarmed with flies and you're not going to die from it from that perspective. And almost you need a chest timer, right? So I'll go into this. So when you are cooking your food and you've taken it to its 75, let's just say chicken, turkey, let's keep congruency. We'll use turkey. 75 degrees, it's cooked, right? So what you want to do is take that turkey out the oven, shred it down as quickly as possible. The chest timer needs to start. That food can only stay out of the fridge for 90 minutes to be deemed safe. That was in inverted commas, by the way, to podcasters. Once that then goes into the fridge, the chest timer stops. Once that comes back out the fridge again for you to take it to work, the chest timer starts again. When you go beyond that 90 minutes, that's when it comes a bit iffy and weird, and it's a huge gray area. People can do what they want with it. I can't say one way or the other. But if we were having this conversation in 6 months' time, we would have a whole different ball game altogether, with the fact that the car is 25 degrees, not 5 degrees, right? So you then get into a whole different conversation in that respect. But yeah, cooling down time is the big one that would help you not only eat safely, but also help the food's life for a longer period of time.
Yeah, so after I cook, let's say 4 portions of chicken for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, on a Sunday, getting that cool after it's out the oven, I prepped up and I put it in the Tupperware box, getting that to cool down, then it going in the fridge.
Yeah.
And then when it comes back out, either heating it up straight away if you're working at home, or getting into a fridge when you get into the office and heating it up at lunchtime is going to give you longevity, as long as you've not got a crazy commute.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But really useful advice, Jonny, because I think some people do really worry about the longevity of food that they cook on one day, in 3 days' time, or whatever. And I guess you do get out of jail when you get the chance to reheat it again, I suppose, because for a taste perspective, but maybe not from a gut health perspective.
I guess both. I mean, some people like food cold. Others, I think it's a bit more of an identity and a mindset thing with this food shouldn't be cold, therefore it has to be warm. And there's a conversation to be had there as well. But yeah, I mean, you can also use other ingredients within that dish. So for example, if you've got rice and you've run the rice under cold water and that's cold, and you've got vegetables that are also cold, put your hot chicken on the cold base. That's going to help to attack it from a different perspective. So there's like loads of little tricks that you can do that you would only know by being in the industry and basically a bit of trial and error, or listen to this podcast. And
Yeah, there we go. With fast track things. Okay. You mentioned knife skills there as well. I am a massive proponent of scissors for prepping things because I'm useless with a knife, which is unusual for a Glaswegian. Insert your joke there. But when it comes to, like, for example, if I'm cooking chicken, or we'll go turkey again, I'm slicing it up with my scissors into the pan to pan fry it on a on a Sunday. That helps me a lot because it takes me a lot less time than if I diced it all up on a chopping board. It's also easier to just clean the scissors rather than the knife and the board. But I am somebody that's quite bland and quite plain. And if in the days where people said you just had to eat chicken and rice, I actually was kind of okay with that because I can be quite robotic, but I appreciate most people are not like that. So we need to speak to that audience, Jonny, and not just me, who's a little bit of a robot sometimes. What can I do to improve this chicken or turkey or this protein meal that I'm going to have for my lunch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that I've cooked on a Sunday? What can I add to it?
Okay, so you're getting an early release here. This is exclusive content pre my own Instagram release. So I filmed a bit of content a couple of weeks ago that was called Around the World in 7, right? So if we were to take your bro food example, chicken, rice and veg, turkey, rice and veg, by the end of this hour, we will be saying turkey instead of chicken. So Around the World in 7. So you take the same ingredients, you don't season them at point of cooking, but you season them maybe after cooking or whilst you're cooking it, you split them and then you season them differently. So you could almost challenge the listeners to take one ingredient and flavor it 7 different times, 5 different times. And you can go, I don't know, deep south with a barbecue southern fried chicken flavor. And I'm talking about the pre-mixed seasonings you can buy in supermarkets. They're already done for you. You haven't got to mess around trying to be a chef to figure out the taste palette. You can then dip into jerk chicken, into the Caribbean. You can come across into the Mediterranean, tomato and herb. You can go Chinese 5-spice, Indian. You could almost make it around the entire world in the 7 days. Same ingredients, different flavors. So as another little rule, it's a really simple hack that you don't really need to be that good at cooking to just sprinkle on some seasoning.
Yeah, because I was joking with you before we were getting this arranged when I was saying that, like, spices for me was like a big thing I wanted to ask you about, because I remember adding like different paprika and stuff like that to my chicken during the cooking process, and it just crusted and like it was just terrible. And I remember being like, I'm gonna have to eat that on Wednesday. and it didn't look appetizing at the time of cooking, and it's never gonna be better 3 days later after it's been in the fridge. And obviously we appreciate that we're eating for function, for fueling ourselves, but you also need a bit of taste as well. So these pre-made packs, I've kind of pan fried the chicken. It's looking pretty good. I'm adding it just after I'm finishing up. When's the kind of optimal approach?
There's 2 options. With a dried seasoning, you can actually just add it afterwards. If you're going to add it to like a frying pan, it's going to burn. So the powder is going to burn. That's what happened. I do have sort of like a condom chicken thing that I use, where you basically wrap the turkey. I said condom chicken because that's what I called it. You wrap the turkey in cling film and you basically boil it. That's where a dried seasoning comes in really, really well. Or putting it into something like rice. So once you've drained the rice off and it's still steaming, you can add the seasoning to the rice, and it's not going to burn, but it's going to infuse within the rice, if that makes sense. I think that's a big point you made there, is, like the burning of food, because seasonings and sauces can happen. That will burn the quickest if you're not covering it. And even if you do cover it, sometimes it does burn. And then you get this, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to eat that at some point in time. People don't like waste.
Yeah, well, no, we don't like waste, do we? And that's why you were saying there at the start, we were talking about people eat probably quite like heavily for the next few days, because there's food in the house and they don't want it to bin it. And we were brought up saying you need to clean your plate if you want to have dessert. So best believe we're just cleaning every plate and every box of sweets as well.
100%. One of my friends actually at one point in time said to me, I can't lose weight. I just can't do it. I can't do it. I said, like, tell me about what your eating habits are like. And he's like, oh yeah, I eat my mum's food as well, and then I eat my girlfriend's food. I'm like, well, there's your first issue. Like, not only are you eating your food, you're cleaning everybody else's. Why don't you try and just not eat the leftovers? And it worked.
Yeah, of course. So I've asked you there about spices. That's really, really helpful in terms of when we can apply it in the different ones. Do you have a particular brand that you go to in the supermarket for these kind of ready-made ones that we can add to our turkey?
I think different supermarkets have a different selection. So our local Sainsbury's doesn't have as a bigger selection as others, but they have their own Sainsbury's brand, their own brand ones. I'm not sponsored by Sainsbury's, by the way. Other supermarkets are available. But I was in Tesco's, and they must have some kind of deal with Schwartz, because they had, honestly, it felt like it was the entire aisle long of seasonings. Lamb seasoning, fish seasoning. I mean, it doesn't even, you could probably think of one and it exists, right? But it really doesn't matter. It's just whatever your taste palette is going to enjoy, pick that one. It's a really difficult one to give advice on as well, because you may or may not like chili, right? And I may be really susceptible to it and all that kind of stuff. So I can't say use chili and that's the one you should use. You'll have to just trial and error it a little bit.
Yeah, and there's plenty of options out there, as you said. No, that's really, really helpful, Jonny. And a lot of this will link into what we kind of put a pin in at the start, which was around color palette, wasn't it? When you were speaking about the variety on the plate and what it should have. What's the process behind that, and where did that all come from in your coaching?
Possibly from myself, just a slight awareness of looking down at the plate and thinking, hang on a minute, this is, I should really probably be having some more vegetables here, and it should look a bit more colorful. And I say that with a slight pinch of salt, pardon the pun, because there are vegetables that are out there that are the same color. It's all beige, right? So if we talk about like carrots, parsnips, and potatoes, there's 3 great vegetables, roasted vegetables there that are beige. We're not saying to demonize those. But ultimately, the bigger the color, most colorful things are going to be low in calorie and high in micronutrients, which is going to help that performance and the recovery. And it's going to help everything from a whole 360-degree angle. And then if we eat them first and make them taste decent, you're less likely to eat the bread, right? So if you were to take 2 people, the chances are they're going to eat the bread first because they know that it's the tastiest bit. And then the vegetables get left last, and then they don't ever finish them. But actually, if you did it the other way around, you'd lose weight if weight loss is your goal. You wouldn't gain weight if you just did that the first way around, right? Eat the color and then eat the rest, or lean protein and then in. So yeah, it's just from a all-round health perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and it's just encouraging people to have more of those high volume, less hyper palatable, but making them more hyper palatable, because like you say, of course, our taste buds have evolved over the years to be like, oh, the bread's the most rewarding thing because it tastes great. But if we improve the taste of the vegetables on the plate, then we're also drawn to eat those, and it will fill us up quicker, rather than we could smash bread rolls for days, couldn't we?
100%. And I guess if you, maybe it was the fact that when I used to scan food, sometimes I'd scan food before I ate it, right? Which I would always advise people to do, because doing it afterwards, you do sometimes have a few tears. Damn it, I wish I'd never eaten that, right? Or the realization of like, holy shit, there's that many calories in it. And if you just take a normal slice of bread, for example, and weigh it, it's going to be 200 to 300 calories for a slice of bread. Now, if you replace that, so if we took that with scrambled eggs, for example, and you then change the bread for spinach, tomatoes, broccoli, just to name 3, spinach, you've got 4 different veg, 4 different colors, loads of different macronutrients, micronutrients, and it's probably less calories in the bread.
Yeah, and there's more chewing involved. It's sending signals to your brain that you're filling up, and it saves carbs for when you want to fuel performance or whatever later on in the day, or
rainy day,
or whenever. Yeah. I'm a big fan of a higher protein, higher fat, lower carb breakfast if I'm training later in the day, because I'll push my carbs in around my workout, and that leads me into talking a little bit more about nutrient timing, Jonny. And how do you see that play out with some of the coaches and the clients that you work with?
I guess it is, as much as it should be a very prominent point, the first step is to get food tasting good, well-tasting food. Then you stick to things a bit more often, because if we were just to take turkey, rice and veg and eat bland food for 5 days, what do we think is going to happen on a Saturday, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, right? If anybody's listening in London, Thirsty Thursdays, probably any big city, you start drinking on a Thursday and then it's actually Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Your weekend's actually 3 days long in like calorie weekend version, right? But I guess with the timing, it's a later phase because we need to get people winning and results to start with. But I was actually at the gym the other day and I felt like I dragged myself through the workout because I'd fasted beforehand. I had like a tiny apple, I think an apple beforehand. And I'm okay to do that, right? There's each to their own, right? Some people like a bit more of a disgusting workout. I'm 100% certain I would have performed better if I'd eaten. So we have this whole different topic, not necessarily based on nutrient timing, but misinformation about the fact that you'll lose more weight if you train fasted. When actually your performance will be better. You might lift 5 kilos more. You might do another rep. So your total weight lifted is way higher having eaten than having not, right? And I think we overlook that a little bit. A lot of people's default, isn't it, is just to starve yourself. Like if I don't eat, then I can't. But then you have this case that, like your donut, for example, you have a crash. So if you don't eat and you fast, and you are fasting until 12, and then you miss your opportunity to eat and you don't end up eating until 2 or 3. And then what you do eat is 1,500 calories in one go. And you've just undone all of that starving yourself beforehand. But I guess you have to just play around with it yourself with timing. I can't eat oats before a gym session. I feel like I need to, when I hit the, if I lie down at any point, I feel like I'm about to pass out and go to sleep because it just makes me drowsy. But that's all just whatever your body's going to do with that food. That might come into what we said before about changing your gut's ability to process different types of food effectively.
Yeah, massively agree there. And I think I probably have 3 or 4 different meal combinations that I have pre-workout, depending on the time of the day that I'm training at and depending on where my circumstances are. So am I on a train on the way back from a meeting? Am I in an office? Am I at home? Or am I training on a weekend on a morning? Something like that. I'll have different variations. And all of the things that you're talking about there in terms of how I respond to the different foods have been taken into account. Yeah. And even for like fasted training sessions, for me, it needs to be like early on. So I'm still kind of feeling the effects of the food from the night before. Otherwise I feel super flat and I can't get like a pump because I don't really have any carbs in me. But hydration is a big part of that as well. And I guess we won't go into the depths of that in this podcast, but a lot of people mistake dehydration for hunger, don't they? Especially first thing in the morning. So with all the things that we're bringing to you today and all the knowledge that Jonny's dropping on you, make sure you're hydrated before you eat, because otherwise nothing's going to fill you up, is it? So 100%. Big fan of that when it comes to nutrient timing for training. But also, like, I think about nutrient timing for performance within the office environment, performance within the business environment. So you will have hours of deep work on your laptop at times, Jonny, to fulfill your different contractual obligations, to organize different things. I'm the same, working in a corporate 9-5. I need to be focused at my desk. And we talked there about the crash of the donut sometimes, but equally, like, if I smash a massive oat bowl and I'm training in like 2 hours time, I'll be fine to train in 2 hours, but some of my work within that 2 hours will be sluggish, because you said you want to go to sleep, don't you?
Yeah. Honestly, I must have been a couple of years ago now, when I had the meal prep business and I was having my protein oats before a workout. And it was only a small tub, like 300 calories wise, but it just affected me in such a way. It was like I wasn't going to get anything done. Absolutely nothing at all. When actually something little and often, which is kind of why we touched on it very, very briefly at the beginning, the various different types of diets work for different scenarios, right? You could almost, instead of just being keto or just being one way or the other, You can take little bits on certain days depending on how you are, right? So your day down to Liverpool, it might have been if it fits your macros day, because that's what works at that day. You might have thought to yourself, well, maybe I'll do a little bit of intermittent fasting because I know that the choices I make are going to be higher, blah, blah, blah. For myself, with like, if I was doing a full-on work day, I would just eat little and often, which is kind of like the chef's go-to. We just pick all day in and around food. We don't ever really want anything massive because we're around food all the time. So I had a content day. It was like 8 to 9 hours of basically just cooking and thought process and all that kind of stuff. And I just picked all day long. So like eating every 3 hours fitted for me at that point in time. So I guess, yeah, it's not, I'm sorry I can't give a direct answer to the question because I would love to be able to, but I guess it just has to be, like if you're going to eat oats and then go to the gym and you feel drowsy, maybe don't eat oats the next time, or you need to try it again just to see if it's anything else in play, if that makes sense.
And the timing around it as well. So it could be like eat the oats an hour before rather than 20 minutes before, or eat the oats an hour and a half before. I'm the same. I have to get different timing. So I know that my kind of cereal, cocoa pot based pre-workout meal, I can eat closer to the gym because it digests faster because it's more carbs and sugar than when I eat the oats because it's more fibrous and it digests a little bit slower. Yeah. So, but I think you lamenting that you can't give a really direct answer is the reason that podcasts are so good, because we can give nuance, because it isn't a case of Dr. Jonny prescribes this, and it's without being able to like really get into the symptoms of what each individual has, because everyone is different in that regard. One of the things that a lot of people fall into though is different diet types, but also different like superfoods or health foods. And I wonder, what's your opinion on what are some of the health foods that you actually recognize as being very important that you like to always try and suggest that people include?
I'm going to go curveball and probably give an answer that you're not necessarily expecting, but I wouldn't suggest or recommend any, but there's a caveat to that. Like, let's just try and eat as many as possible, right? To single one out and just eat blueberries for the rest of your days. Yes, that it might be deemed as a superfood at some point, but what is a superfood? Is it something that's low in calories, high in micronutrients? Most colorful food is. Most colorful veg has a huge water content. So is that a superfood because it's hydrating you as well? There's so many different elements. And actually the answer to that question would be the color palette answer. Just make sure that you're eating as many different colors of food as possible. And I don't mean artificial flavors. I don't mean Haribo and lining all the colors up, but I mean proper color. So yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Jonny. I think again it gives a kind of point to the nuance of of what is involved within a diet. Now, I think I agree with you when you say there's a disconnect between what's achievable in certain recipes and certain kind of traditional high calorie meals that we try and create like a fake away or a healthy alternative to. In that space, are there any particular recipes that you're especially proud of that you've managed to create over the years that ticks both the kind of calorie conscious approach, but also it's still tasty and it tickles that fancy of ours that we've got for that food?
It's not a new recipe, and it certainly wouldn't be mine because I'm British, and if we took my surname, it would be German. So there's no way that it could be coming down through family. But a lasagna. So I had a lasagna on the menu, called it Mama's Lasagna. One of the 2 meals that my mum can cook. 3 meals my mum can cook beautifully: roast dinner, lasagna, and a banoffee pie. Probably not for the calorie conscious, but still they're damn good. And I took the lasagna and for me, I'm quite a good copier. And I like to go into recipes and look at them from Jamie Oliver, Heston Blumenthal, maybe not necessarily Gino D'Acampo, Gordon Ramsay, all these people. So I open the recipe books and I try and remove ingredients to make it the lowest calorie form possible, to see if it actually needs it in there or not. So the lasagna is mine because contrary to what we were saying a minute ago about we've got to eat this in 3 days' time with the burnt chicken, beef is one of those, or corn mince, improves over time because it just kind of like it's left to marinate and sit, so it gets better. Actually, I would advise people to cook a lasagna, leave it for 3 days, and then eat it because it's actually better. So that's my go-to. Not only can you cook 8 portions, put it in the freezer, it cooks really, really well from the freezer. It's also relatively low in calorie, high in volume, got carrots in there, butternut squash in there, tomatoes in there. So that would be my one. Yeah, the lasagna.
Especially proud of your lasagna, though. That's helpful. Yeah. What were some of the things that you were able to pull out when you're looking at that list of ingredients that maybe your mum does for the Becker family dinner when it's a lasagna, and you know it's not particularly calorie conscious, but when you make it from a health perspective, or when you were making it in the meal company prep days, what were you pulling out?
So obviously the high fat cheese, and a reduction of that. It certainly doesn't need an entire block of cheddar cheese plus the cheese sauce. The cheese sauce is there for a reason. I think the cheddar cheese gives it an element, and this is kind of this is a real chefing type conversation now, because texture has a huge element in what a food profile tastes like and how it feels to you when you eat it on your palate. So the cheese is like there for a crispy element, right, and for color. So we can completely reduce the amount of that and not actually have much at all. To the eye, you'd go, well, I definitely need more cheese in that. But cheese melts and evaporates over the pasta on top. The other thing is I use gluten-free pasta because it crunches better. And if you soak it in water beforehand, the pasta expands by like double the size. And therefore you don't need as many pasta sheets. So there's a couple of little hacks just there real quick. And then I would add, I added butternut squash to it and grated carrot to just give it volume. Therefore you're not eating as much beef, and that's spread out throughout the entire lasagna. And then I swapped the 12% or 15% or 20% fat beef to 5%. And just with some flavoring and beef stock cubes and all that kind of stuff, I just made that a bit more succulent. So yeah.
Yeah, bang on, Jonny. I really, really like some of the thought process that goes into that. And I think you can apply that framework to lots of other recipes. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you though, are there any recipes where you just had to hold your hands up and say, I just cannot get near the original, where you had to admit defeat?
So there's two examples that are springing to my mind right now. One of which is a Jamie Oliver 30-minute meal that I tried to create in 30 minutes. And the reason why I messaged you about the disconnect between skill and ability kind of thing is that it didn't take me 30 minutes at all. It took me 45 to 60 minutes, and I destroyed the kitchen. Like when I think back now, all I can see is flour everywhere, right? Everywhere. So not only did it take me double as long to cook, it took me the same amount of time. It took me the 30 minutes that he suggested in the first place to clean down afterwards. And even when I had done the online coaching thing, some of my clients had said to me that the Gusto meals are very, very similar. They take quite a lot of time to prepare. Yes, it might be 5 minutes to cook, but it's a lot of preparation time. And my second one was in the meal prep business, when it didn't make it past like the 5th trial meal. So we would cook a meal, we'd go, oh, this is banging, we'd eat it straight away. You leave it in the fridge for 3 days. All of a sudden it's in a puddle of water. And you think, hang on a minute, we're selling this to people for the process of eating it in 3 or 5 days time. And it got to a point where I was just trying and trying and trying and trying, and it just wouldn't get any better with what I wanted to achieve with it. And I just binned it. I was like, that's not going back on the menu. And the people were disappointed because they would eat it straight away and it would be okay, but it just didn't make it past. So yeah, there's been a few where my hands have gone up. God, that didn't quite work.
Yeah, I know from working with Muscle Food is one of my affiliate deals that they have like a fakeaway range. And some of the pizzas are absolutely brilliant, and they just add more meat to it. So it's a higher protein. So it's more filling than a traditional, very carb-based pizza. But then I've done like maybe like their fish and chips. Now the chips and the potato wedges are great, but can you replicate like a really good battered fish from a chip shop? You can't. So you kind of have to accept that you're having like a much healthier alternative. but it's hard to bridge that gap entirely between taste and calories. But I know that you've got ways that we can do that as well in terms of bridging the gap.
Yeah, I guess there are certain things that you just don't, right? I mean, if we were to take the real simple example of a chocolate bar versus a healthy bar, and you're in the supermarket, you're in that little snaking section where you're queuing up and they're showing you all the millionaire shortbreads and the flapjacks and stuff. And you're like, no, I'm not going to have one of them. I'm going to have the all natural bar, the yogurt coated thing. You think, oh, that would be a good choice. And if you're a normal person and you're not that calorie conscious, you might not read the pack to know that it's probably the same calories as the really tasty thing you avoided to eat. There are some things that everybody just has to hold their hands up and say, you know what, I'd just rather the fish and chips. Now, I guess it then comes down to, what do you really want, right? What you mentioned a moment ago about eating your oats 2 hours before the gym, but actually an hour afterwards you crash and your work isn't as high performance. Which one is more important? So that, I guess that's the conversation you have to have with yourself. Can you push through that slight window through recognition that that's what it is, in replacement that you know your gym session is going to be absolutely on it? Same thing with the fish and chips. If people understood how much oil and calories are in something as fish and chips, and again, people want to finish their plate, so they eat all the batter, they eat all the worst part, best part, whatever you want to look at it. And there are sometimes that if your goal is weight loss or performance, maybe something like that isn't as good as if we were to go to just fakeaways or any kind of takeaway. A vegetable pizza would be a far better alternative because at least you're getting some nutrients. So
yeah. That's such a mindset conversation. I know you bring that to the table, Jonny. So you've demonstrated that throughout this conversation. There needs to be an element of sacrifice in some form when it comes to taste versus calories, if the goal is tight enough that you need to restrict to a certain level for a certain period. And in a society nowadays where we can have everything instantly, so Netflix on TV, Deliveroo, delivering this hyper palatable food where we don't need to chef it up in the kitchen at all, we kind of expect to get everything with no downside, whereas there's got to be a small element of downside. But I think today we've managed to demonstrate in many ways that there's ways to bridge that and still have tasty food while, of course, adhering to some sort of calorie controlled approach.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. I mean, even from a chefing perspective, I'm going to use the royal we are trying to make food taste amazing once, unless the chef is the owner of a meal prep business, and then you'd hope that they would have calories in mind, because that's the whole point, right? But if you're going to a restaurant, they want you to leave a review. Like, if we went out for brunch or lunch or dinner, whatever the meal might be, we want the chef and the owner wants us to recommend us to everybody else. It's amazing. The food's great. Go back there. And ultimately, the chef couldn't give a shit about your goal. They just want that food to taste amazing at that point in time. I mentioned it with holidays. It might not necessarily be that you're not training and you're eating like a knob, right? You might be being careful, but all the choices you're making, you're eating out all the time. You're eating out twice a day for 7 days, 10 days, 14 days. That's where your calories are, not the fact that you haven't gone to the gym for 2 weeks. It's just a different thought process, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. And like you say, it's not in their best interest for you to save a few hundred calories on a lighter option that's, I don't know, a pan-fried fish rather than a battered fish. It's in their best interest to be like, wow, that restaurant was incredible. Like you say, I want to go back there, or I'll recommend it to my friends so they go back there as well. And their North Star, their ultimate goal is significantly different from you, and you just need to accept that or choose accordingly when you get the chance to order your different food. But Jonny, yeah, absolutely love that conversation. So much in there that people can action, people can take on board, people can move forward with. If the audience want to continue the conversation with you, where's the best place for them to go towards?
Instagram. So at the Coach's Chef. No E in the middle of the chef. I didn't know that until my Brazilian wife, by the way, told me. bitch. She knows better English than I do. But yeah, no E in it. So just coaches with not an apostrophe because Instagram doesn't allow it, but yeah.
No problem, Jonny. That'll be linked in the show notes below, incorrectly spelled and everything, but I'm sure we can move with it. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, which I'm sure you have, please leave us a 5-star rating. That's available now both on Apple Podcasts, but also recently on Spotify. So hit that 5-star, tag us on your Instagram story, take a screenshot, tag me at call.cambro and tag Jonny, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.